Always on your side. This is First Coast News at 5.
First at 5 tonight, new details just released on the path of Hurricane Florence. The National Hurricane Center just issuing its latest advisory. And tonight, Florence is continuing to churn toward the East Coast as this powerful storm eyes the Carolinas.
And the hurricane remains a Category 4 storm at this hour, a major hurricane. Out at Jacksonville Beach, we are seeing some local impacts from the storm with large waves and an increase in rip currents. We're going to check in with our Bethany Anderson in just a minute, who is at the beach monitoring those conditions. Now, at this hour, mandatory evacuations are underway in North and South Carolina for millions of people. And this video to my left shows troopers beginning to reverse lanes of Interstate 26 in South Carolina, and all those lanes will be heading west.
So officials warning residents to get out now before the storm strikes. And here are the top headlines at this hour. There are hurricane warnings now in effect for the southeast U.S. Mandatory evacuations are underway as we speak, and utility crews right now are preparing ahead of the storm.
Our storm experts are tracking the latest developments for us today at 5. Our Lauren Routing-Krantz is at our other studio tonight. But first, we begin with the ultimate storm expert, Tim Deegan.
Thanks, Anthony. Well, we've said it before and we'll say it again. Even if you don't have any of the other data, but you have a satellite picture, as these cyclones become more symmetrical, they become stronger. Probably doesn't take me to tell you, look at this. This is again becoming very symmetrical, and so the winds are up to 140, moving along pretty quickly now for a hurricane, west-northwest at 17, so a strong Category 4, and this satellite presentation seems to indicate that this hurricane could become a Category 5 hurricane. Of course, anything from 3 up is considered major. Bottom line, it's kind of like the movie. So here's a look at all the clouds and the official cone. Let's take the clouds out of the way and just focus on where this hurricane is going to go. First of all, for us here at the First Coast, notice the southern part of that cone is pretty much Savannah north. So again, things look good for us. We say west-northwest. The exact compass heading now is 300 degrees. We've seen the compass heading go from 295 this morning to 300. It's just 5 degrees, but with this hurricane still 900 miles offshore, 5 degrees adds up. The main focus continues to be South and North Carolina, and really think somewhere between Myrtle Beach, Wilmington to the Pamlico Sound area, and then it slows down. We've been showing you really since Labor Day the possibility of what are the chances of it going outside the cone. Well, unfortunately for our friends in the Carolinas, the chance of some possible recurvature, those chances are so low now, I'm not even going to talk about that. There is still the slight chance that it's going to take more of a southern motion, especially as it slows down at the coast. And that's why we're watching closely, especially for those of you up toward the Savannah River Valley. But bottom line, good news for us, very bad news for the Carolinas. We're talking about catastrophic winds and storm surge, but then look how this hurricane is expected to slow down. We'll see the winds diminish, but this slow motion, which we're becoming increasingly confident about, means that this hurricane will be capable of producing a Harvey-like event, maybe worse, because remember, as you go worse, or west, that is, instead of Houston's flat scenario, you have, of course, the Appalachians, and therefore the concern for flash flooding. We've heard from a lot of you that have friends and family in the North Carolina area. So we're going to go to our North Carolina area meteorological expert, because that's where, well, Lauren did a lot of her forecasting. Lauren, why don't you share all that you know for the folks?
Hey there, Tim. Yes, of course, it's a big concern. And you know what? They really haven't seen anything quite like this, in quite some time. Fran, back in 1996, was one of the last storms of this magnitude to make impact in the Carolinas. And actually, a little fun fact, Hurricane Donna was making landfall actually on this day back in 1960. Back then, the Cape Fear region was talking about storm surge of about 4 to 6 feet. With this storm, from the Myrtle Beach area, the Santee River area, all the way up past that border into Carolina, just about the Cape Fear region up towards possibly Topsail Beach, we could be talking about a storm surge of 6 to 9 feet. Now, the thing with North Carolina is you have kind of an interesting topography along the coast, okay? You've got that very shallow shelf just offshore, and so with that, and also this very shallow sound, the Pamlico Sound that Tim was mentioning, a lot of that water likely to quickly wash out towards the west. So you'll have to watch, of course, areas along the western portion of the sound, but then also when the water comes back, it could push back over those islands and move back into the ocean. So this is a big concern for the folks that are, of course, all the way from Myrtle Beach, all the way up into the Cape Fear, even up towards Cape Lookout, and even up towards Cape Hatteras, as well as areas inland from that Pamlico Sound, and of course along the creeks that they do have in the area as well. So coming up, we're going to talk more about, of course, Florence, the impacts up here if you have friends and family, and we'll take a look at how strong the winds possibly could be according to our computer models.
Lauren, thank you for breaking that down for us. And as we mentioned earlier, we are seeing an increase in riptides out at the beaches as Hurricane Florence moves closer. And our Bethany Anderson is live at Jack's Beach right now with an update on those conditions for us.
Anthony, it might seem like the perfect day to dip your toes in the sand, but if you come out here to the beach, you got to be careful. The lifeguards are out and the red flags, they are flying. Take a look at these surfers that are all the way out there. Some of them just getting crushed by these waves. So if you come out to the beach, you've got to know your limitations and know when the current is just too strong, because already these lifeguards tell me they have been swimming and pulling people out all afternoon long. And of course, we're going to continue to stay out here to monitor these conditions to let you know how everyone is doing. Reporting live from Jack's Beach, Bethany Anderson, First Coast News, on your side.
And you can get the latest advisories, model runs, and storm preparation checklist and other resources in our Hurricane Central section. That's right now at firstcoastnews.com and on our free mobile app. It's free for both Android and Apple devices.
Today marks 1 year since Hurricane Irma hit the First Coast, and a lot of families, a lot of businesses are still to this day recovering. Some, unfortunately, may never fully bounce back following all of that flooding and damage. So this was the scene a lot of us have etched in our memory, water just rushing into neighborhoods. Hurricane Irma led to more than 100 deaths and caused more than $50 billion in damage in the United States alone. It was, in fact, the costliest storm in the history of Florida. Water reaching more than 5 feet in parts of the First Coast. And one of the hardest hit areas was San Marco. That is where Jeannie Blaylock joins us live now. Jeannie, I know you've been following the stories of so many businesses that have been recovering over the past year. Now a lot of them, fortunately, are thriving.
You are right, and I want to tell you tonight a story about San Marco Strong. Now, this is Hollingsworth, a tile and lighting and hardware and design store. Now, this store was brand new before Irma. They'd only opened 18 months ago. It's right along San Marco Boulevard, and I remember so clearly, I'll never forget this, coming into San Marco after Irma, and I walked here across the street, and I saw all this wood piled up. I walked in, and my heart just sank. I talked to the owner, and he told me something that really at the time I had a hard time believing. Take a look.
You know, I panicked.
His beautiful store, his dream, trashed by Irma.
So my parents own Turner Plumbing. I'm fourth generation in the industry, and opening up this retail store has always been my baby.
But here it comes. The owner said something that I will never forget.
It's destroyed, but we're gonna put it back together. And we have an amazing team here. 3 weeks.
Now that is some spirit, and that's why we all said First Coast Strong a year ago today. Whoa, 3 weeks. I really had a hard time believing that. How long did it take you guys to reopen? This is Stephanie, one of the designers
Hi
here.
there. It was actually 4 weeks.
That's doggone close to 3 weeks.
We were back in and we were working. Yeah.
And show everybody, Rich is going to look how beautiful this store is. How did you do that so fast?
So we had a crew working 24/7. We had a night crew, we had a weekend crew. It was nonstop.
Oh man, well congratulations for thriving once again.
Yes.
But now we're looking at another hurricane season. Are you guys nervous?
We're hopeful. We're hopeful.
We're all hopeful and praying.
Yes,
So
yes.
congrats on doing so well.
Thanks.
And we want to take you across the street now. You know your neighbors across the street, they were struggling too. There's a store over
Everybody.
there. Yes, we have been following for over a year now, and this is Rusted. We saw them open, then we saw the hurricane hit, and Lana Harris is checking back in on the folks at Rusted.
They say when life gives you lemons, make lemonade.
We all look a little rough.
But they always skip over the part where things get real sour.
I walked into a place called Rustic today. It's on San Marco Boulevard. Good Lord.
These three owners of the Rusted Vintage Market are watching news coverage of themselves from a year ago, cleaning up the remains of their shop after Hurricane Irma all but destroyed it.
You're just overwhelmed.
A year later, it still makes Jean Karst tear up.
You know, it just floods back.
Flooding back are the memories of their vintage finds halfway underwater.
This is the water line.
This photo taken by her sons, who got to the shop by canoe.
The initial seeing it was just shocking.
So they took their lemons and started squeezing away.
It was stressful, but it was also exhausting because we were up here cleaning, doing all kinds of repairs.
Most of us have never tried to put a store back together again. That's a whole learning curve.
But then came the sugar. They found that out of the rubble came fresh new ideas.
We're so in a negative space, it's just like, well, let's dream.
Hopefulness came and we got excited about doing some new things.
They decided on a color scheme, a wall of built-in shelving, and a new checkout counter. But they acknowledge this past year hasn't been as kind to everyone.
Life has moved on. Life in San Marco has not. We still see things that are boarded up and being worked on.
Still, they're proud to say they took the sour fruit and made a tall, cold drink they could be proud of.
Yeah, it's good lemonade.
They've got a lot of spirit at Rusted. There it is right down the street here from Hollingsworth. And we asked Rusted, now what are you guys going to do differently this season? They said, well, if a big hurricane is headed our way this year, they're going to take all the stuff from inside, all of the furniture and all the items, and move it somewhere else, keep it out of harm's way. That's the lesson they've learned. So San Marco trying so hard to rebuild, some thriving, some still struggling. But tonight at 5:30, we're going to take you down to St. Johns County on this one-year anniversary of Irma. See how they're doing down there now. I'm live in San Marco. Jeannie Blaylock, First Coast News on your side. Heather and Anthony, back to you.
Wow, a difference a year makes.
Yeah, sure does.
Good to see that they're thriving down there. Well, the troubled Eureka Gardens Apartments over on the west side continues to face challenges tonight.
Some big challenges, but find out why residents have been given new hope by the current management company to fix the ongoing problems there. That's next.
Across the country, people are pausing to remember the deadliest terror attack in the nation's history.
It was 17 years ago today that terrorists hijacked 4 airplanes, killing nearly 3,000 people. That horrific day began when hijackers crashed American Airlines Flight 11 into the World Trade Center's North Tower at 8:46 in the morning. Then minutes later, United Airlines Flight 175 was crashed by hijackers into the South Tower.
And within less than an hour of the 2 attacks on the Twin Towers, a 3rd hijacked plane crashed into the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. A 4th hijacked plane was stopped from hitting the intended target by passengers, and that aircraft crash landed in a Shanksville, Pennsylvania field. So 9/11 is one of those days where we all remember where we were.
Yeah, we sure do. And just to put it into perspective, this year's high school seniors, they were just babies when it happened.
I mean, some of them probably just born.
Yeah.
Following the attacks, President George W. Bush addressed that nation that night in a primetime address.
Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America. These acts shattered steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve. America was targeted for attack because we're the brightest beacon for freedom and opportunity in the world, and no one will keep that light from shining.
New York City residents and families of the victims of the 9/11 attacks gathered at the memorial to mark this 17th anniversary. The fire department marched with bagpipes and the American flag that survived after the World Trade Center towers fell.
And a group of local firefighters were in New York for an annual tradition to honor the hundreds of first responders who died while sacrificing their own lives to save others. But this year's trip for a few JFRD firemen has already been an unforgettable one thanks to the Jags. After hearing about the tradition, defensive tackle Malik Jackson provided the firefighters with custom-made jerseys and sideline tickets to Sunday's game against the New York Giants this past weekend. The firefighters say it was an amazing start to remembering their fallen comrades.
Those guys were willing to give up their lives that day, and they did. And that happens every day, not in New York City. It happens in a small town. It's that people need to understand this. That's what we do.
The voice you just heard there, that was Jason Kerr. He is a retired JFRD firefighter who's actually dispatched to the Pentagon in Ground Zero a week after the September 11th terrorist attacks. Today, he and 7 other local firefighters joined thousands of other first responders honoring those who were lost 17 years ago.
We will never forget.
No, we will not.
Well, all eyes tonight focused on the tropics as Florence inches closer to the East Coast.
We have team coverage for you with the latest track next on First Coast News at 5:30.